All right, well, for more on Syria, we can now talk to Dr. Nidal Kavalan, a former Syrian ambassador to Turkey, joining us live from Damascus. Thank you for coming on RT today. You are there in Damascus with less than 48 hours left ahead of the ceasefire. Do you think it will actually take place?
Thank you, Rory. It's a privilege to appear on Russia today. It could happen, but it's going to be a little bit difficult now with the escalatory language that has been actually demonstrated mainly by armed opposition gangs. Syria has learned a very hard lesson from the Arab League observers saga. If you remember, the opposition or the armed gangs have actually used the existence of Arab League observers on the ground, and they have multiplied, they fostered in Syrian cities and towns, and it has cost the Syrian army and security forces and innocent civilians hundreds of extra lives, or extra hundreds of innocent lives of Syrian population and army soldiers. To get rid of some of those armed gangs and to clear some Syrian cities and towns. So Syria does not want the same thing to happen again during the existence of any international observers on the ground. That's why Syria has demanded that rebels or armed gangs lay down their arms, and Syria wanted written guarantees from main handlers and supporters of the so-called Syrian
I'm sorry
army.
to interrupt you, but it might be very difficult to get these so-called written assurances from the opposition members, considering there are at least 4 or 5 different factions that all claim they are the opposition. But if I may for a moment, the US and its allies are adamant that Assad has to go, but that is not a part of the ceasefire deal. How do you see Syria's next chapter if all sides drop their arms?
I think, you know, before Obama, George W. Bush wanted Assad to go, and Jacques Chirac wanted Assad to go. They have all gone, and Assad is still there. Assad is the choice of the Syrian people. In the most recent referendum, he got almost 60%, despite all the hard circumstances on the ground, of the votes of confidence of the Syrian people regarding the new constitution of the Syrian Arab Republic. I agree with that. We need reform. Reform is vital, is essential for the modernization of Syria, but we want reform in a peaceful and civilized manner, not under the bonnets of the so-called Wahhabis who have been butchering men, women and children in Syrian cities and towns. So, okay, Obama can say what he wants, the West could say what they want, but what matters is what happens on the ground. What is happening on the ground in Syria, particularly in recent weeks, is that the state, the government, the army is regaining control of the majority of Syrian territory, and, you know, armed gangs are running away, fleeing to Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and, you know, some...
If I may just jump in for a moment, I do apologize again for interrupting you. We are so low on time here, but I want to continue this conversation. In recent days, we've had the so-called Friends of Syria meeting that occurred in Istanbul. We've spoken to some Syrians who say that group is not the friends of Syria, they are the enemies of Syria, and yet they're the ones who are arming the rebels. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, you are absolutely right, and they are absolutely right. Friends of Syria are Russia, are Venezuela, are China, you know, countries who have been supporting a peaceful end, a peaceful settlement for the dispute in Syria. If those so-called friends of Syria who've gathered first in Tunisia and now in Istanbul, who are actually enemies, bitter enemies of Syria, are supporters and friends of Syria, they would have stopped the media propaganda, the media provocation initiated by Qatar and Saudi Arabia, mainly Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya TV channels. They would have stopped arming those militias militias in Turkey and training them in Turkey and some other neighboring countries, mainly Lebanon, Turkey, and probably Jordan and Iraq. If you are a friend of Syria, then you would help the government accomplish a peaceful solution to this ongoing crisis. Those people who have gathered in Istanbul are the same who have gathered previously in Tunisia. They are a group of warlords and they are warmongers, and they are actually trading with the innocent, the blood of innocent Syrians who have been killed, almost 7,000 or 8,000 of them. Almost half of them are army soldiers and security forces who have been butchered by those armed gangs. Friends of Syria would support a peaceful settlement. Enemies of Syria would go on arming and training and financing those Islamic fanatics who have been trying to dismantle the very existence and undermine the very existence of a secular state in the Syrian Arab Republic.
Dr. Nidal Kabalan, I wish we had more time for this. We don't here on RT. Former Syrian ambassador to Turkey, thank you for joining us live from Damascus.
Thank you. Thank you. A pleasure.